All right, Pops. I've been I've been telling the story about heritage and lineage, and I had to catch myself because there's one video where I said he had been diagnosed in 2014 or 15, but I tried to make a video to later catch that because like I said, all this is real and raw, and I don't edit anything. I just put it up there, and then I noticed it. So I'm curious. I want to hear I want to hear your story about Grandpa and everything. I want to make sure that I'm setting the record straight.
So you want to know when Grandpa told me
Like yeah, like
and where we were?
the lead up to like the conversation that was going on.
Well,
Anything you remember?
your grandparents had come over for dinner. Your mother and I lived in an apartment in, I believe it was New Hope at the time. I'm not 100% on. But after we had dinner, Grandma and your mom were in the kitchen cleaning up. Grandpa and I went in the living room and we were sitting watching Lawrence Welk. He was kind of off to my left-hand side. And we had been talking, just small talk. He reached over and he put his right hand on my left knee. And he got a all serious look that didn't normally see on my dad's face. He looked at me and he says, "You're going to have a son." And I kind of grinned and I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'd like to. I'd kind of like to have a boy and a girl." And he says, "No." He says, "You're going to have a son." Okay. He says, "I can't tell you when, but I won't be here to see him." Yeah, right. And he said, "Dad, you're healthy as a horse. You're the most healthy person in this entire family."
And you were born after he came home from the wars, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I was born in 53.
53. Okay.
Because he came home, I think it was 45.
45.
I think. I'm not.
And you said when he came home, he worked at that bakery.
He worked at Zinn's Master Bakery in downtown Minneapolis, which is no longer in existence. But he told me that he wouldn't be here. And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, Dad, sure." Didn't think anything more of it. Until, I think it was either late 74, early 75, that he had the accident with the boiler falling on him. And ever since that episode, he had health issues. And he kept having severe headaches, which he never had.
Right.
And I was jealous because everybody else would get severe headaches. He never got any.
Right. Always healthy?
Oh, he would, and I'm not exaggerating because you can ask any other member of the family. He would go out in dead of winter with no shoes and a tank top t-shirt and his pants, and he'd walk around outside.
That part of the bloodline skipped me. I'm sorry, but that's the one time where someone can call me a pansy, get away with it, because I am not about the snow and cold, which, of course, always brings to question, what the hell are you doing in Minnesota? Well, I'm here.
And I remember one time, and it was in the early 70s, we had gotten, we were living in Crystal on Edgewood, and we had gotten the worst snowstorm that had happened in years. The roads were closed and everything else. And your grandfather got up, walked from Crystal all the way out to St. Louis Park, where his truck was parked, only to find out that his company wasn't putting trucks on the road because of the snow.
Golly.
So he turned around and walked from St. Louis Park all the way back to Crystal to the house. When he got there, Grandma told him that I had been sick and I was running a fever and I don't know what all, but he looked and he says, "What do you need?" And she says, "I could really use some ginger ale to see if that'll help calm him down." And he said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." He started going door to door. And he got down to our neighbors about 3, 4 houses down. About 3, 4 houses down, knocked on the door, and this gentleman was on the city council of Crystal. So our roads normally got plowed and were maintained because of him living there. But he asked if he had any ginger ale. Well, being the city council, they threw parties, and he said, "Yeah." And my dad says, "Well, I've got a sick boy at home and I could really use some ginger ale." He went and got him a couple bottles and he said, "Here, you take this. If you need more, let me know." And Dad looked at him and he says, "Well, how much do you want for it?" He says, "No, no, just take it. You got a sick son." My dad says, "Either you let me pay for it or I don't take it."
Mm.
I don't take anything from anybody for nothing.
And that was what year?
Early 70s, I'd say maybe, could have been 69 or 70. And Grandpa gave him $5 for 2 bottles of ginger ale. But that was Grandpa. He didn't take handouts from anybody.
Right.
He either paid for it or he bartered for it.
Right. He wasn't going to get something for nothing.
And he tried to instill that in his kids.
So, and of course, I mean, just like any time someone comes up and they try to predict something to you, it's like, "Yep, okay, yeah, here's your number."
Well, when he told me that I was going to have the son and he wouldn't be here.
Had he done something like that before, where he had seen something or made that kind of prediction?
Not
or?
that I know of. Not to me, anyhow. And like I said, we were sitting there watching Lawrence Welk, and Grandma and your mom were in the kitchen putting food away and doing dishes. And you could hear laughter and stuff coming from the kitchen, which was extremely rare because
Mom and Grandma?
your mother and Grandma was like oil and vinegar. They didn't mix.
Oil and water?
Either way, they didn't mix.
Love you both. Love you both.
And Grandma kept telling me, "She's not the woman for you." God told me she wasn't the woman for me.
But love is love and you loved her, right? Or am I wrong? Don't give me that look.
I'm giving you this look because I can't honestly answer it.
Right.
Because when I went out to go to the church, I turned the key in my car and it blew up.
Like through a rod or?
I wasn't mechanical for.
Right.
All I know is there was a big bang and a bunch of smoke, and it just It weren't going nowhere. And I'm like, I walked into the house and I'm like, I need a ride to the church. And Grandma and Grandpa both looked, well, I thought you were going to drive. My car just blew up. And right away, Grandma said, see, I told you you shouldn't marry her. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you can come in.
It's open. I closed it to kill out some of the noise.
Harley David.
You can open the door.
We was in here having conversation about past and everything, and I'm killing out some of the noise.
Because I came back and was like, damn it, the door's closed. This is the only bathroom and I gotta pee.
We're live.
Where was I? Oh, and I'm like, well, I still got to have a ride to the church. So I called my cousin. His name was Butch, but everybody called him Tiny. And Tiny didn't fit because he was like 6'7", 300 pounds. But there wasn't an ounce of fat anywhere on his body. And I called him and I said, hey, can you give me a ride to the church? Yeah, why? He said, my car blew up. First thing out of his mouth is, see, told you shouldn't marry her. And I'm like, can we just get beyond that? I just need a ride. So we ended up getting married and, you know, the whole 9 yards. There was a fight at the reception with my best man, which happened to be my brother,
Right.
who happened to have dated your mother before I did.
Right.
Must be talking about Uncle Dad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uncle Lenny.
Yep.
We were talking about the kind of person Grandpa was, and I was interested in like the details of him predicting my birth because it's something that I talk about, and if I'm talking about it, I want to make sure that what I'm saying is actual. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, listen to this story, you know, because it's this and this. It sounds like a fairy tale. No, this is real. This is real.
Well, it was real, all right. After Grandpa had the accident and he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, which back in the early 70s, it was diagnosed as an inoperable brain tumor. So they did the chemo and everything else, and he lost his hair.
Otherwise my wife wouldn't be here.
He lost his hair and lost everything. And
I gotta go eat.
he started going downhill. So we were all taking care of him. When it got to the point where he ended up in the hospital. We lived in Silver Lake. Grandma and them at that time was living in their house that they gave to my oldest brother, who cheated them out of that. But that's where Grandma was taking care of them, and us kids would go help whenever we could. I remember I was at work, and that was before cell phones, so they couldn't get a hold of me. But they called the chief of police of Silver Lake, who happened to be one of my best friends.
Hold up, I gotta pause. The fact that you threw in that it was before cell phones, that's kind of comical, but All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, like I said, they called the chief of police, who happened to be a good friend of mine, very good friend. He came to the place I worked, which happened to be at that time Glencoe Manufacturing. Went in and found the foreman and told him he had a message for me. When he told me, he said, I just got an emergency call from your mother, and they said you need to get to the cities as fast as possible. So I went home, didn't bother to change. I picked up your mother, and we drove to Minneapolis. We were all taking turns going in and seeing Grandpa. And while he was in the hospital, I went to see him, and he literally threw me out of his room. He looked at me and he says, son, he says, please leave. And I'm like, no, Dad, I'm here. He says, I don't want you here. I don't want you to see me like this. I want you to remember me the way I was, not the way I look now. And I looked and I said, you're my dad. It don't matter what you look like, that you're still my father. And he says, that's exactly right. So he said, you need to honor me and leave.
That had to be rough.
I got as far as the outside of his room and I started to bawl. Because the first thought that came to my mind is my dad didn't love me.
Right. Well, and you said growing up he wasn't really the affectionate type, but
He didn't physically show it,
right.
but you never doubted. But when I was like that, one of his nurses came up and she looked at me and she says, are you okay? And I don't know. I said, my dad just threw me out of his room. And she says, don't take it like that. She said, he threw you out because he doesn't want you to have a memory like this. He wants you to remember the good stuff, not him fighting for life, and just remember the good stuff.
He wanted you to remember the strong version of him. He didn't want you to see him at that time. I understand that. Definitely understand
We
that.
were taking turns. Somebody, one, I don't know who was, but they basically sent me on a coffee run, so to speak, while at Hennepin County Medical Center where he was at, and he got the best care that anybody could ever have. I had to go down, I think it was 3 floors in order to get coffee. I got it. When I came back up, everybody was sitting in the hallway crying. And I looked and I'm like, what's going on? And Grandma was a literal basket case. She was crying and just out of it. And somebody finally told me that Dad had passed away. And I was like, I didn't even get to say goodbye. And what hurt, your mother was in there holding his hand, and she kept rubbing it in my face that she was in there holding his hand when he died. Your mother and I were happy for maybe 2.5 years,
Right.
and we were miserable for 4.5. But when we were still in Silver Lake, we lived above a barber shop. Down on the corner to the left was the little place we always used to hang out because it was called the Saloon, but they had the best damn hamburgers any place around. We used to go in there and have hamburgers and play pool. One Friday, Saturday night, your mother and I went to a dance. I can't remember where it was, but it was like a dance hall. It wasn't just like a
Medina
saloon or something like that, huh?
Like Medina Ballroom kind of thing?
Something on that order, but it was like they had the live band and the big, huge dance floor. And your mother kept ordering, it's going to sound weird, but your mother's favorite drink at that time was a slow screw.
Right.
And it was vodka and cranberry juice. And when we got home, one thing led to another, and we ended up making love, and she ended up getting pregnant.
All right, now on some of this we can skip details.
Well, that's what I said, but it was like from that point on, she blamed me because it was my fault. Not that I was the father or the dad or the man or whatever.
Just the fact that it was your fault, period.
It was my fault because I'm the one that wanted to go to the dance, and I'm the one that made her drink the drinks. In her mind.
You had a gun to her head, I take it.
Yeah. I had a big shotgun.
Right, right.
But after everything was said and done, your grandfather, the day he passed away, was October 18th, 1975. It was in the evening. I don't have the exact time frame.
He died the 18th or the 15th?
He died the 15th. He was buried on the 18th. Never paid any attention to it until a year later, October 18th, 1976. Again, it was evening. According to your grandma, it was within a half hour or so time frame of him being put in the ground and you being born.
It wasn't my name originally going to be something else.
Yeah, please don't ask me what it was.
I had heard, the version I heard was that Mom was going to name me Damien to upset Grandma.
No, your mother was going to name you Damien to spite your grandma. There was no upset intended. Because those two, like I said, there was no love loss.
Yeah. That is definitely a story for another time.
Yeah, because that could be lengthy.
That's a story for another time. But
with when you were born, even the day you were born, I was going nuts in the hospital. because back then it wasn't like now where fathers could be in there and all this kind of. No, I was out in the waiting room pacing, and I kept asking, how's my wife? I'm sorry, I can't give you that information.
And now I understand where I get my hatred for hospitals.
And I kept asking every nurse that come out, how's my wife? I'm sorry, you'll have to talk to the doctor. How's my wife? I'm sorry, I can't give that information.
No.
Finally, they came out and said, you have a son. How is he? I can't give you that information. Well, how's my wife? I'm sorry, you'll have to talk to the doctor. And I said, I'm going to talk to somebody, and somebody's going to give me some information, or I'm going to jail, and this hospital is going to be minus a floor. Because I've been here all day, and nobody's telling me nothing. The doctor finally came out and said, no, your wife's fine. Everything went well. Your son's doing great.
Is it true I was 1 ounce over the threshold? Something like she was told if she had a baby more than 9 pounds, and it was going to be complicated, and I was exactly 1 ounce over.
No, you were actually 2.5 ounces over. From what I remember.
Interesting. So once again, I was already going against the grain.
Well, yeah, because that was part of the issue is they couldn't make up their mind whether it was going to be natural or cesarean.
Right.
And I don't know how they ended up with what they ended up with, but all I did is, hey, I thank God that he had 10 fingers, 10 toes.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, so my name. Because
there was a big argument over your name. We were all sitting at the dining room table. And your mother kept throwing Damien into the picture. And every time she did, your grandma was shooting daggers at her. And I just looked at her and I said, there's no way in God's green earth that my son is going to have the name Damien. We ended up on, I wanted Jason because to me it just sounded like a good, solid name. The hassle came in on she wanted you to be named Jason Arthur after her father. And I wanted you Jason Frank. And like I said, the debate went on for quite a while. And then Grandma spoke up and said, why don't you use them both? That way you're honoring both his grandfathers.
Leave it to Grandma.
And I looked at her and I said, what did you say? She said, use both of them. Name him Jason Frank Arthur. That way you're honoring both of his grandparents or grandfathers. I like that.
Yeah, thanks. They come signing papers and crap. You should have heard what I got when I joined the Army, and they said sign your name on the dot, or they had the little slot for first name, middle name, last name, and then whether you was a junior or senior. And I did the first name, got to the middle part, and I was like, so which one do you want me to put? Well, which one do you use? Both. Which one has gone on your paperwork beforehand? Both. All right, let's not make it complicated here. how many names do you, what is your full name? And I told him my full name, and he's like, good God, and you're going to put rank in front of that? You're going to have fun with your signatures. I'm sorry, that just reminded me.
But yeah, we ended up on that, and she hated me for that too,
I'm sure.
because
Uh, when did it like when did it take you back to Grandpa's prediction? Like when did it dawn on you that holy shit?
if my memory serves me right, it was like a week after you were born,
Week after I was born.
because we were doing the birth certificate because you were going home. And I went to sign my name on the birth certificate next to your mother's, and I looked and I was reading the date on the birth certificate, and there's something about that date that looks so familiar. Couldn't put two and two together. When we got home, I was talking to Grandma, and I said, I don't know what it is, but there's something about the date that just bothers me. And she said, well, there's a pretty good reason why it should. Am I missing something? She said, yeah. She said, remember the conversation you had with your dad sitting in the living room watching Lawrence Welk? And I said, holy shit. He was right. I had a son. He's not here. And my son was born on the day we put him in the ground. Dad, how in the hell did you know?
The interesting thing is, and I will openly share this, is I know when I was a kid and you used to tell me that story, I used to get upset, and you used to get upset that I got upset.
You didn't get upset. You got mad because you kept saying you blamed yourself, because you kept saying, well, I'm the reason Grandpa's dead. Because you couldn't, when you were younger, you couldn't separate the fact that there was a year in between him going and you coming, but you still could just see it as he was gone and you were here. You weren't going to get a chance to sit on his knee, to hear his stories,
Right.
to ask questions. And I tell you what, your grandfather had some really doozy stories.
I don't doubt that at all. To the fact that he survived World War II and the Korean War, great grandpa survived World War One.
Well, the surprising thing that I didn't know until years later was your grandfather drove an ambulance in the war. But the reason he did that was because he was going to the front lines in an ambulance to pick up the dead and the wounded. But being as how he was driving an ambulance, he was also a courier. He used to carry messages from one officer to another on what was coming up or whatever, where our lines were, whatever they were sending. And I'm like, oh, that must have been cool. And your grandma said, yeah, except for the fact that if he had ever gotten caught, he would have been shot as a spy.
So absolutely.
And I'm like, what? And then that's when I started putting two and two together and coming up with 6. And it's like, oh man.
And then in the Korean War, he was an MP, worked with POWs.
Yep.
And that was, of course, that's long back before they had any idea what PTSD was.
He came home. Well, we know now that it was PTSD, but he came home and he suffered with, back then,
Flashbacks and
well, back then they called it fits.
fits.
Fits, Fits,
Okay.
because he would go into rages and he would black out and not remember anything of what went on. There was no rhyme or reason or specific thing that would set him off. The littlest thing could set him off. One of the biggest things that would set him off is arguing. If there was argues or fights, then that kept going and going and getting heated and stuff.
So he was definitely anti-confrontational. Or, yeah.
I remember one time we were on a 3 or 4 day vacation type thing, and we had went up to Finland, Minnesota, where his sister lived with her husband. He wasn't my uncle because my uncle divorced. They got divorced, and he was my uncle. This was just my aunt's husband and his son. I'm sorry, but there's no soft way of saying it. He was an asshole. He would drink, and when he would drink, he'd get nasty.
Right.
And he'd pick fights with everybody. Well, he started picking on your Uncle Lenny, whom you kids later called Uncle Dad. But the one thing with your grandfather, and he said it from the time I was old enough to realize anything: you don't mess with my money, you don't mess with my wife, and you don't mess with my family. When he started picking on Uncle Lenny, your grandpa got... He didn't get upset. He got mad. And if he got mad, one of two things was going to happen. It was either going to be a knockdown, drag out, or he was going to go into one of his fits and he'd start shaking uncontrollably. And when he started that, he didn't want anybody to see him, and he walked out of the house. We tried calming everything down at the house, and Grandma and us kids went looking for him. He didn't take the car. We found him like 4 or 5 blocks away, face down in the ditch. He had passed out. When we got him up, he kept looking around and he kept, what's going on? Why are we outside? Where's my shoes? Where's my jacket? And Grandma sent us kids away a little bit so she could try and explain to Grandpa. When he found out what had happened, we went back to the house, went to bed, got up the next morning, and left. And that was the last time we ever went to that cabin again.
So he was definitely all about business.
Your grandfather was known for his honesty and his integrity.
That was back when that meant something.
Everybody
that
knew.
meant something.
Everybody knew that if Frank Ross shook your hand, you could take it to the bank. Because if he told you he was going to do something and he gave you your hand, you better believe it was going to get done.
You know,
Because
I'm sorry, go ahead.
he always said, he always told us boys, you don't ever tell anybody you're going to do something for them and then not do it. He said, if you don't do it, he said, it better be an act of God to why you didn't. Because if you give your word is who you are. And if you're my son, your word is everything. He says, because I can't give you anything but my name. But it's a good name. Don't disgrace it.
Well, you know, and that's probably one of my biggest frustrations is when I was younger, I saw it differently. Like even when I joined the army, I wasn't thinking about carrying on lineage or nothing like that. It wasn't even there. Whenever I did, join the army, it was under a different. I'm just gonna be real about it. Most people sit there and they'll give you the high school hero story, and mine was not the high school hero story. The road I was on wasn't a good one, and there wasn't a whole lot many options out there, and the ones that were in front of me weren't that great. And I remember I stopped in to talk to Staff Sergeant Gregory Brogdon. He was pretty open and honest. I ain't gonna lie. He was pretty real about everything. Of course, I have to lie a little bit, and he even told me, "You're gonna lie a little bit." I don't know, man. I'm not sitting here trying to picture no saint picture because we know that I'm far from that. But I remember when we hit the questionnaire part, and it got to where he asked if I had ever smoked weed before. And I for the life of me, I said yes. And as he went to mark the no, he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, "Is it on your record?" Well, no. Okay then. Have you ever smoked marijuana? Yes. Okay. If it's not on your record, if you haven't been busted with it, then the answer is, have you ever smoked marijuana? Yes, I have. All right. Are you not picking up what I'm putting down? I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but I know the answer is yes. And I heard about what happens if you lie on your applications, and I'm not trying to do that. He says it's not lying. It's called extenuating circumstances. You're not telling a lie, but you're not giving detailed truth because they're not asking for it. It's not on your record. You haven't been busted for it. Jay, have you ever smoked marijuana? Okay, no. Finally. And then, of course, the rest obviously got me in there. I remember going through MEPS. I remember all of it. And it was the part that made it interesting was the fact that there was a lot of things that I picked up in the military where it was like my first sergeants, a lot of the older NCOs and even some of the older officers would sit and tell me that I reminded them of a soldier of old. And that ties me into, each time coming around Grandma, she would always say, You know, every time I see you, more and more, you remind me of your grandfather. Well, I started thinking about it, and the more I thought about it, that was where I like got in. I started looking at the numbers. Like numbers started jumping out to me. They started standing out to me. And when I did the numerology on great grandpa, Grandpa Frank, you, myself, and Braden, the numerology on that, it literally laid out a diagram of what we're doing. So when the stuff came up about the Minnesota stuff with walls and the $250 million and the 9 billion estimated, I better say estimated. I don't want to be fraudulent. Uh,
Don't leave that to the government.
yeah, right. Well, when I saw that stuff, you know, I remember when I first started talking about joining the army, and everybody was like, "Nuh-uh, Jay, no way. You are not going to the army. First time someone tries to give you orders or get in your face and start barking at you, you're going to Leavenworth." I remember that's what they said. I was the one that was going to get arrested, not finish my term, and Brandon at the time, who was supposed to be going off to the Marines, wound up getting in so much trouble he couldn't even go to the service. That was like a flip. And the more I think about it, you know, it just, things just, everything adds up. Like everything literally adds up. So, Governor of Minnesota, I remember the first time anybody ever mentioned politics to me, I about got sick. It's like, not happening.
I need to share one other thing,
Sure.
and it just
Open conversation. What's up?
just popped into my head, and it's like really hard to your grandfather, when his brother died, and this was after Grandpa was already gone, they were having it wasn't it wasn't the funeral, it was a remembrance of his life, and the entire family, got together, and Grandma wanted to go, but she didn't dare drive. And back then, it was, as it had turned out, it was pretty much Grandma and I, because this is well after your mother and I had split up. I told Grandma, I said, if you want to go, I'll take you. And we got to, it was a Legion or VFW something. And when we walked in, one of my aunts came up to greet us at the door, and she gave Mom a big hug, and she turned and looked at me, and she stopped and turned as white as a ghost. And she says, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" She said, "When I turned and saw you, I saw your father standing there." She said, "You are the spitting image of your father." And I looked at her and I said, "Thank you. I'm going to take that as a compliment." And she said, "You should." She said, "Your father was one heck of a man."
Well, honestly, like I said, to learn the lineage, it's like that. It's a pride feeling without being prideful. You know, like the once upon a time there used to be value in that kind of stuff. Where, you know, if someone would show up and they just see something and then it's like they share information with you, you don't think it's going to happen, then all of a sudden, boom, it happens. And people would look at the details of that, and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing. I'm helping people out. I'm making a difference. And everything has gotten to be where everything is so shallow nowadays, where everything is just surface value. There's no depth. And when I start doing the depth on both grandpas, uh, his dad, him, military services, the length that it stretches, the wars and stuff that our family has been involved in, and when you look at where we're at and everything that we've been going through, that's my biggest want. That's my biggest deal. And in all honesty, if Grandpa was here and he had seen that that I was running for a governor spot, and if I was to say,
He's probably turned over in his grave like 3 times since it happened.
if I was to say that in the very first act as being a governor, that I was going to take a 75% pay cut to live amongst the people that I'm there to help and to govern and protect and all that, and that I was going to open the governor's mansion to the veterans that are in need, the ones that need a place to stay till they get on their feet, or the ones that are homeless that need a place to stay. That's exactly what that would be for however long that I could remain in office. That's exactly what that mansion would be. That would be my first 2 acts.
But that would be your grandfather. Because your grandmother and your grandfather, from the day I was born and could understand words, they had an open door policy. Didn't matter what time of day or night. If you needed some place to get in out of the cold, you needed somebody to talk to, you just needed a cup of coffee, the door was always open. If you came at mealtime, didn't matter what we were eating, there was always room for one more.
You know, I just thought about something. I would love, now that I've kind of brought you into the mix of things, I would actually love interviewing all the family members if they'd be up for it. One for certain.
There's not a lot of the family left.
I know. But I know one for certain that I wouldn't mind hearing from is Uncle Don.
You might get him to talk. I honestly don't know what his beliefs are anymore, because
well, and that's probably the best thing that I've heard that I've got going for me, is because when they ask me if are you running Democrat, Republican, liberal, what are you running? And I told them I'm running American. I don't know if that's what that is, but I'll you better make another slot, because I'm not on either side.
The one thing I can tell you is your uncle is extremely religious.
Well, right.
But he's Jewish.
Right.
He was Jewish by choice.
Yeah, I remember.
And that was, hey.
You follow you and do your thing.
The one thing that sticks out more than anything as far as your grandfather, my father, was the fact that he made sure that every one of his kids, especially the boys, believed in honesty, integrity, compassion.
The old school values.
If you were walking with a woman, you always walked on the outside.
Right. Yeah, because Grandpa was a gentleman. We have lost so many values, and the majority of them is the ones that have us giving a shit about each other. I know one of the biggest things that I heard every family member talk about was it didn't matter if you were the president or the janitor, he shook your hand and he would talk to you no matter what. But I'm gonna wrap this one up, and then we'll if you're up for it, I like sitting and having these conversations with you. And we've had plenty that aren't recorded, but the chance that I got to do this, I'm grateful for it. So
Well, one short little thing that sticks out with your grandfather. I was still living at home, and I think I was 18. It was before I married your mother. I was working at a Shell station in St. Louis Park. And the guy that I was working with, him and I were buddies. We closed down the station. It was a Friday night. And he looked at me and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, probably going home." He says, "Let's go cruise Lake Street." Okay. He had a really nice car. And he says, "Oh no, we're taking your car." I had a 57 Chevy Bel Air, 3-speed hearse with Krager chromes all the way around. And we went cruising. And they didn't realize it, but I was out all night. I got home and went to walk into the apartment somewhere between 6 and 7 in the morning. When I opened the door, all I remember is my father's fist hitting me in the face and knocking me across the hall. And I'm like, "What the heck, Dad?" And he said, "As long as you live under my roof." He said, "If you want to stay out all night, that's fine. But if you ever do it again and you do not bother to call your mother and let her know you're okay, don't bother coming back to this house. Because your mother sat up all night worrying sick on whether or not you were okay. And all it would have taken is 5 minutes for you to stop at a phone and call and say, 'Hey, Mom, I'm okay. I'm not sure when I'll be home.'
right.
But you do not disrespect your mother." From that point on, respect became extremely important.
I love you, Pops. And I'm if I can honor his name in any way, it's going to be through running for this governor position. And I've already had enough people tell me that, you know, the ideas and such, the fact that the math adds up and everything, that they support it 100%. So
Well,
I appreciate the conversation. And we're definitely going to have more of these. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to start doing this when I meet people randomly through town when I'm playing my guitar. I think I might sit down and see if they'll let me record our conversation, our interactions. Let people see that it's not quite as toxic as what they're trying to advertise that it is. Because I've run into a lot of good people out here. But I thank you for sharing. Because, like I said, you literally shared that live. So I appreciate the time. I love you to death.